We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Archaeo Animals, the podcast all about zooarchaeology. I'm your host, Alex Fitzpatrick, and here with me as always,
Simona Falanga.
And today's kind of a weird episode because we're actually talking more about modern day stuff than anything archaeological. Today we'll be talking about primitive breeds. What are they? How are they still in existence to this day? Just all kinds of stuff like that. So I guess the best way to start this off is to explain what a primitive breed is. Basically, it's a specific type of breed of animal that's not really changed at all from their ancestors, which you'll probably recognize a lot of these ancestors because we've talked about domestication a lot on this podcast.
No.
I know, right? Also, my favorite thing about researching this episode was I found a report by M.L. Ryder from 1981, and straight up just say primitive breeds are unimproved breeds, which is kind of harsh, I think.
A little bit.
So pretty much, but it was just really funny. It was like the first sentence of this report. And it makes me kind of want to be that harsh in my actual reports.
I could give the primitive breeds some love. Usually they're a lot healthier and hardier than some of the modern day breeds for the most part anyway.
But I just like the idea of being like this garbage breed of whatever. Please calm down. I just started this report.
No, I think the way to see it with primitive breeds is basically, if you like all the ancient animals we've been discussing about, you may also like this series of animals. I mean, of course, primitive breeds pretty much solely refers to domesticates, so your sheep, cattle, pigs, horses, which, well, as you said, showed little to no changes. Their not necessarily their wild ancestors, but sort of the very first created varieties.
Yeah, I couldn't think of what was the actual word for that, and I still don't actually know. Do you know off the top of your head what that is? Because it's not the wild predecessor, but it's like the next one. This is why I'm not in doing genetics and stuff. I don't understand anything.
Well, because I guess some of these primitive breeds, which is the correct term. So it makes me itchy every time, but it is the term.
Yeah.
I guess some of them do indeed still look very much alike the wild ancestor. So we'll see with certain breeds of sheep that look uncannily like a wild mouflon.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so it'll be either the wild ancestor or just the earliest sort of form of this animal as a domesticate.
Yeah.
Which I guess the term would also be primitive.
Yeah, it's not the greatest term, I feel like we can agree on, but technically it's the term, I guess.
It's a term that it's there. So.
Yeah, because I remember when we were first talking about doing an episode about this, I actually was confused, as I normally am, but it was mostly because there's a difference between primitive breeds and then the kind of movement you see with rewilding and reviving extinct species. So basically, like we were saying before, primitive breeds, they still exist. They've been a continuous lineage for the most part. That we're not necessarily bringing extinct species like mammoths back when we talk about primitive breeds.
I think it's just because I think the support towards sort of increasing the number of breeding pairs of primitive breeds or heritage breeds would be another perhaps better term for it. In a way, like I think one of the main reasons behind it is its applications in conservation science, but also land management, because you find that a lot of these earlier breeds are much hardier than some of the current commercial breeds. So they'll be able to not necessarily consume less food, but make the most out of the food that is available to them. So in a way, they're more economical to keep.
Yeah.
And they put less of a strain on the environment. So a lot of people and organizations have been championing these primitive breeds.
Yeah, and there's one specific case that we'll talk about later in the episode, but their whole thing is that they want to bring back or at least continue the existence of what they refer to as keystone species. So species who had a huge influence on the environment, and the idea being that we bring these kind of species back and a more populace that we can help with environmental changes that are happening. And I think this is also a good place to also talk about that this is, you might be listening to this going, why are they talking about this? This has nothing to do with archaeology. Well, you're wrong, because it does. It's basically the idea of like primitive breeds and stuff like that. You can kind of consider more of an applied zooarchaeology. There's a lot of different ways to talk about applied zooarchaeology, but a lot of times it has to do with conservation science and using zooarchaeological data to kind of provide the biological and cultural information that we might not have right now, and apply them to the present and the future.
Yeah, because it could be something as simplistic as sort of looking at extinct species and where they went extinct and why. So that could be a good lesson for the future, sort of going forward about stopping animals from going extinct. Please make it stop. But also it can be very useful in, as I mentioned before, in land management and wildlife management. Because if you do a study, like, for example, we've discussed in our earlier episode that the brown hare has actually been introduced to Britain and is not native to Britain. So having that information, perhaps not so much of the brown hare, because their numbers aren't terribly high as far as I'm aware, but with other species, they can inform decisions on which species to encourage and which to control if need be. Look at sort of the great squirrel, to mention one. Or you can also look at, areas where a particular species or breed has gone extinct. If you find that out from the zooarchaeological data set, so then you look into reintroducing those animals back in those areas, so it can inform decisions sort of in that aspect as well.
Yeah, and I think people kind of don't consider, like, to be honest, before maybe like 2 years ago, I didn't even know about applied zooarchaeology. And I think it's easy to kind of not even think about that as something, as a methodology, because we always think of zooarchaeology and archaeology in general as something in the deep, deep past where you're only dealing with, extinct species from prehistory, stuff like that. But, there's plenty of examples of more historical zooarchaeology. So something that's relatively more recent than, say, like the Iron Age, and using zooarchaeological data from species that have kind of more recently gone extinct or have at least have had a huge loss in population in a certain area, and being able, like as you said, to apply that kind of data to looking at how can we reintroduce them into this area, how do we continue to let them thrive in this area, what are the pros and cons of them remaining in this area, all stuff like that. And it's really interesting, and it's a really cool way to see how the past can be used to deal with the present and the future.
I think it's incredibly useful and incredibly important, because at the end of the day, we mainly deal with historical and prehistorical data sets, and we learn a lot about past civilizations, and that's great. That's really important. But at the end of the day, it'll be great to do something more with this data set that can actually have an impact, a good impact on society today as well, not just learning about the past for learning's sake, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's where the emphasis is on referring to it as applied zooarchaeology, because you are actually applying that to, something I mean, I don't want to say applying it to something that matters, because obviously all archaeology does matter, and it better matter. Otherwise, we'd all be out of a job. It's something that's current, something in progress that we can apply it to, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Absolutely, it all does matter. It's just a case that it's great if we can use that knowledge to also have an impact today.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing actually that just came to me, sort of how you could use sort of zooarchaeological data sets. Although I guess it'd be much more recent historical zooarchaeology, you could be, in a way, it could help us move away from some of the highly commercialized breeds that are sort of very fast growing. They tend to have a plethora of health issues attached to them. So looking at sort of more historical and heritage breeds, or the way they looked at in the past, can help us perhaps to revert our breeding back to an healthier animal.
Yeah, no.
So like say, it's a lot more recent with dogs, but again, I'm going to make the pug example again, because if you look at historical photos of pugs, they look, you probably wouldn't be able to recognize them.
Yeah.
Their facial structure, morphology was quite different, overall a much healthier animal. So of course it's much more recent than say looking at, primitive sheep from 5,000 years ago. Having that knowledge about what they used to look like and the fact that they were healthier animals can help us in the future to perhaps breed back to that. So you have a breed that is a bit less problematic.
Yeah, no, exactly. And also that just reminded me that since recording our dog episode, it's ruined pugs for my partner. So every time he sees pugs, he just gets really sad.
At least
and he looks at
the show.
He looks at me and he's like, you ruined it for me. They used to be so cute. Now it's just sad.
I know.
I mean, they're still cute.
Unless it's a Roman pug.
True, unless it's a Roman.
Get your face out of them. So the dog is on the show.
But yeah, no, applied archaeology, like we were saying, is so cool. And also, I'm super jealous of the people who get to actually work with these animals, because it's the closest thing you'll get to people. It's like a very cliche thing, I think, when people talk about archaeology and they kind of romanticize it as it's like time traveling. I get to touch the past. But these people who work with these primitive breeds get to,
You're having they do walk in herds moment.
It's so cool. I have, I'll talk about them later, but I have a friend who works with primitive breeds of sheep, and it's the coolest thing in the world. And I love it so much. And I'm so jealous. It's so cool.
Yeah, I think speaking of which, real quick sort of OT, I didn't think I'd ever see something as cute in my life than a Zoe lamb.
I know, Zoe lambs are so cute. And it's great to think that there were probably people that, ages ago that were also being weird about how cute they are, like I am right now.
Well, I mean, if you saw, because they look, we'll get into it later, but they do look an awful lot like the wild counterpart of the sheep. So if you're just rolling around 6,000 years ago and you saw one of them, wouldn't you want to domesticate it?
That's true.
You don't want to take it home. They realize, oh, I can also get milk out of this. Score.
So truly with primitive breeds, we get to realize the intentions behind people in the past domesticating these animals.
It was cute.
I don't blame them. They're pretty cute. And also, I just realized it must be so cool to... Oh, God, this sounds morbid. But it must be so cool to have access to their bones.
Okay.
I mean, think of it, like a zooarch thing, right? That's what we do.
But it'll make for a great data set, because you can compare sort of Neolithic specimens with, say, modern-day specimens of this primitive breed and see how much alike they look.
Sorry to bring it immediately to dead animals, but I guess that's kind of our podcast, so I don't know what else anyone would expect.
I don't know. Have you eaten today?
I ate this morning.
So no tea yet?
No, I did have a giant iced coffee, though. Some real New York stuff.
Just because we'll be talking about a lot of animals that are used for meat in this episode.
Yeah, no, to be fair, this is, like I said at the start, this is a bit of an unusual episode for us because we've obviously talked about more modern stuff. I mean, technically all our case studies are modern because they're all, archaeological research. I think it's kind of interesting for us to talk about these primitive breeds because they are living, breathing animals that still exist. They're still here. And it's really interesting to kind of talk about, the positives of kind of maintaining these breeds and like how we can gain so much data from studying these breeds. And I think it's also funny because all of us are used to working with dead things. So if I went and saw a real sheep, I would not know what to do with it.
Just leave it be, because chances are they don't want to come anywhere near you.
That's true. I would not do anything, but it's like I've had friends who are not in the field ask me questions about animals before, and I'd have to be like, I don't. They'll be like, oh, what bird is that, or whatever, and I'll be like, literally, I could not tell you unless you stripped all of the flesh off of it, and I got a chance to look at its bones. Not very helpful. Yeah,
no, please don't do that to living birds. But yeah, no, and I have met some of this primitive breed. They're very cute. I've met a flock of Zoe sheep. They're quite timid. Ugh. Even for a sheep, they're quite timid. But they're cute.
They are cute. There's so many cute primitive breeds of sheep. And one thing I realized when I was researching this is that all the information from them are from people who sell their wool. And I was like, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. It would be like a huge thing, huh?
Well, yeah, because I think you can probably sell it at a premium if it's from a heritage breed.
It's probably nice.
Okay, maybe no wool for now. I think it's a bit too warm today for that.
That is true. It's getting quite warm. But yeah, I think we should probably take a break and then we'll start talking a bit more about these primitive breeds. I feel like we're kind of confused almost because we are talking about things in the present tense for once. It's weird. Super weird. All right, we'll get used to the weirdness and we'll be back after this.
Yeah, see you in a bit.
Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code ANIMALS. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. That's in the UK, for those of you that don't know. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com, and look for the link in the show notes to this episode.
And we are back here with Archaeoanimals, and we are talking about primitive breeds and applied zooarchaeology today. This part of the podcast, we're going to talk a bit more about some specific examples. So I think we should start off with sheep, because it's kind of what we were talking about right before we went on break. And there's plenty of examples of primitive breeds of sheep. We have stuff like the Icelandic sheep. There's another breed that I'm thinking of, Jacob's something sheep. Should have wrote that down.
The Jacob sheep, yeah. I believe the Herdwick may also be descended from sheep that's been introduced by the Vikings. And there's another one I can never pronounce for the life of me.
I think that's going to be, well, at least for me, that's going to be a recurring thing. It already is a recurring thing. I can't pronounce like half of these words. So these sheep, like the Icelandic sheep, the Icelandic sheep specifically is a short-tailed sheep from Northern Europe. And the idea is that they were probably brought to Iceland by the Vikings. So thanks for that. But I think the primitive breed that we want to talk about the most is the soy sheep.
Because they're very cute and they're very small. Because their name originates from Soy, St Kilda, although the sheep itself does not originate from there because it was only introduced to the island in 1924. The Soy itself as a breed, it is believed to have descended from the first sheep that were introduced to Britain in the Neolithic period. And in fact, they do remain very similar to the Mediterranean mouflon, and so the first domesticated sheep in Central Asia. So they're very, very, very small. They're about a third of the size of a modern sheep. What's really interesting about them compared to other breeds is that they need ruing as opposed to shearing, because the Soy naturally shed their wool. So, of course, there's no need to actually sort of shear them with a certain frequency. Those who do produce wool can literally just hand pluck their fleece.
Just sounds nice, to be honest.
Just plucking sheep. No, I mean, that was indeed the case for the first sheep that were domesticated. It's just that I think we may have discussed that in our sheep episode. Over the centuries, because I guess we wanted to exert more control about when we harvested the wool or the fleece, we sort of bred them in a way where they would no longer naturally shed their coats. So now sort of we have that extra control over it, that we have set times when we shear the sheep and we have all of the wool all at once. Because that wasn't always the case, and is still not the case for the Soy.
Yeah, no, sorry, I got momentarily distracted because I just realized, is any of the primitive sheep based, were they the basis of one of the newer Pokemon? And it turns out that the Jacob sheep might have been the inspiration. I'll send you a picture in a bit. I tried to, but it didn't work. It's very important. Yeah, Wooloo.
I kept trying to remember that breed of sheep, but I just could not.
There's a lot of sheep. But yeah, for those of you who are familiar with Pokemon, specifically the newest game that came out kind of recently, yeah, Wooloo and Dubwool, which are like my favorite Pokemon now. If you haven't seen what it looks like, please Google it. It's very cute. No one cares about Marie, Tristan. It's all about Wooloo, baby. Yeah, just had to derail the podcast with a Pokemon reference.
And it was the Manx Lockton.
Ah, okay.
Which are, by the way, the sheep that they keep at Butser Ancient Farm. So you've met them. Oh,
I have met them. I meant to look up what sheep were at Butser Farm, and I completely forgot. So I'm glad we were able to include that.
Yeah, no, they have
Is this the death metal sheep?
Yes.
Sorry for butting in. Is this the death metal sheep?
One of many.
I really love these sheeps. You know the sheeps that's got the big horns up and down?
That's the one.
This looks so metal.
Although I'm pretty sure the Jacob sheep also have sort of the same horn shape. But yeah, no, they're quite rare, so there aren't many breeding pairs about, and they do have 4 or occasionally 6 horns. And
six horns,
as you may expect.
That's brutal.
I think I've got a very sort of heavy metal photo of some of them somewhere. I've tried to find it. I'm pretty sure I put it in the sheep episode.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it might be in the sheep episode. Basically, just go back to the sheep episode. Yeah. We'll probably talk. You probably already talked about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, we just thought we'd mention lots of sheep breeds because I do have a sheepdog sat next to me, so I thought she might be able to offer some extra insight, but I think she only cares about a chew toy.
Yeah, that's fair. I would too. But yeah, I also feel like when it comes to primitive breeds, sheep were the first thing I thought of. I don't know about you. Yeah, I kind of just associate them maybe because I don't want to say that there are more primitive breeds of sheep, but I feel like they're definitely more prolific in terms of I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
I think there might be with sheep, because when you think about it, in terms of sort of sheer numbers, there's a lot more sheep about.
Sheer. Oh, gosh.
Bah.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Just sheep have been kept sort of in higher numbers
Yeah.
for so long, because if you look at data sets sort of all the way from the prehistoric periods, like chances are that usually sort of your assemblage does tend to be more heavily oriented towards sheep or goat.
Mm-hmm.
Because you would tend to keep more of them. So 'cause you would get sort of a lot more breeds coming out of it for different purposes.
Yep, something that my supervisor kind of sent me like 10 comments about on my latest draft. I was just like, you have to explain why there's so much sheep, right? It's like, oh yeah, that's important, huh?
Because sheep are a useful all-round animal that can be used for wool or meat or milk. So many possibilities.
Yeah, apparently you have to explain why these things are in the archaeological record. I, of course, did not know that. I'm writing up my PhD right now.
To be fair, no, I guess you'd kind of have to, because otherwise, like, oh, there were many sheep here, because...
Yeah, no, it was a very good point. And also, I immediately slammed my head into my table, because I was like, I cannot believe I wrote an entire chapter without explaining that.
Please don't do that. You're not a sheep. You don't have horns. It'd be quite painful.
I wish. That'd be so cool. Anyway, speaking of sheep, let's go to the other thing.
Not sheep.
The other, not sheep,
Also
but
known as
also
goats.
kind of sheep. The not kind of sheep.
Yeah, also goats. I think the one that I've mostly looked into is the British primitive goat. Which, to be fair,
Are you sure that's a primitive breed?
I don't know. I'll have to do some more. Oh, I don't know. To be fair, though, the British primitive goat is actually sort of a bit of a catch-all term that encompasses a variety of ancient goat breeds that were introduced sort of in the Neolithic or from the Neolithic into the British Isles. So generally, it'll be self-explanatory. The British primitive goat is presumed to have descended from the goats that were introduced in the Neolithic period. And they were kept historically as a multi-purpose breed, and very, very, very hardy animals as well, because they'll be able to sort of make the most out of what they were foraging. Yeah, hardy and just generally very like unpicky animals, which I guess that's why I guess for sort of land management they can be quite useful in present day, because they make the most of it, because you can just leave them top of a mountain, happy as Larry. They don't care. They're fine.
Happy as Larry? Is that a saying?
I believe so.
Yes, it is. It's a saying. But you're just going to have to acclimatize to living here and, getting used to our sayings.
No, never.
Who's happy in New York? Like, what's the equivalent? Happy as... I don't even know.
New Yorkers aren't happy, so we don't have an equivalent.
Oh, yeah.
It's a completely bizarre concept to us.
But who's Larry anyway?
There is no joy.
Yeah, who is...
No idea. We can Google it after the show.
Okay.
Last interesting thing about the British primitive goat, that both sexes have horns.
Which is so cool.
I mean, it's a thing, and maybe not interesting, but it's a thing that's there. It's a fact.
I feel like I kind of wish I had horns. I feel like I could probably accessorize them really well. Like any video game where I can have horns, I usually tend to have horns.
So you normally go for canary?
No, except for that. I just realized, while I was saying that, I was like, but I never play as a canary in Dragon Age. It's fine. Anyway, moving from goats, we'll go to another, surprise, surprise, another domesticated animal, horses. And I think we talked about this breed of horse in the horse episode.
Kind of have to, because I think that's the closest you have to sort of what a wild horse would have looked like.
Przewalski's horse? I feel like I definitely didn't pronounce it right back then. I'm not pronouncing it right now.
I don't know.
We're not linguists. Przewalski's horse.
I mean, I technically am a bit, but let's pretend I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. It's fine. Anyway, so it's a wild horse breed from Central Asia. We definitely talked about it on the horse episode because it's probably the only, quote unquote, true wild horse that still exists, because everything else that we consider as, wild horses are actually descendants of more formerly domesticated, now feral breeds. But while I was researching this, I actually found out that there is a bit of controversy on the Przewalski's horse. It might not entirely be sure.
Przewalski's?
Oh, whatever. Someone will tell me how I'm wrong on the internet. It's fine. Apparently, in 2018, there was some research came out that indicated that these horses might actually descend from domesticated horses bred by the Batai culture in Kazakhstan. So
I wouldn't even be surprised.
There's your horse discourse.
Yeah, so
for
I
the
guess
day.
even our wild horse isn't really all that wild anyway.
I feel like we should refer to, like, as a community of scientists, can we start referring to research that proves other research wrong as hot takes?
Sure.
Like, just be like, did you hear that? See that spicy take in Nature? See that steaming hot take in the Journal of Archaeological Sciences?
Yeah. But I guess in many ways, sort of this horse breed is sort of to this day the way we would picture prehistoric horse. Because I think one of the main things I think that was brought up, because not necessarily in a scientific manner, the Przewalski horse looks an awful lot like the horses depicted in some of the Paleolithic cave paintings.
Yeah, no, and that's actually something that I guess we haven't really talked about in terms of some good things about primitive breeds, is that it gives us the kind of, not the 100% accurate image of what these animals would look like in the past, but like a pretty decent idea.
The closest. If you like this, you'll also like.
Yeah, it's like a nice difference from, say, like people doing conceptual drawings of dinosaurs and then finding out they're all like chickens or whatever.
You're like,
I don't know
no.
what paleontologists do. That's my understanding of it. I'm not a paleontologist.
Nor am I.
Nor do I want to be. Anyway, so that was kind of the only real like primitive breed we have for horses, but I believe you found one for cattle?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of ancient cattle breeds. I think the one I thought I'd bring the example back to Italy.
No.
With Chianina cattle. Although to be fair, it wasn't just there in the Roman period. It was believed to be around since before the Roman period.
Everyone, check off your box on the Archaeoanimals bingo card for Rome. Oh, we should make bingo cards.
Yeah. Right, I've got taxes, Rome, Alex hasn't eaten. Tristan interjects and is shot down immediately. We got a number
Sassy
of these.
Simona.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
Simona has a zinger. Yeah. No, that's a special one. That's the one with that's the middle bit. That's the star. That's the star bingo one, you know?
We gotta do this. Talk about it later, but yeah, we gotta do this. We gotta monetize this.
But yes, Chianina cattle. So they're very peculiar looking in a way, because their fur, their hairs are white, but their skin is black. So they've got a black skin pigment, including a black nose and tongue, but the actual fur is white, which I thought was quite striking. And initially, it was used mainly as a draft animal, so like for working purposes, and as a sacrificial animal. But you'll be pleased to know that in present-day Italy, Chianina cattle are no longer sacrificed to the gods, but they are indeed kept for meat.
Oh, that's what you said. Sorry. Sacrificial?
Sacrificial, that's the one.
There you go. I just kept it going. I was like, that's probably a Roman word.
I mean, in its root, I believe it is.
Yeah.
But never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Also, I just pulled up some pictures of these cattle, and they are amazing to look at.
Yeah, no, they're
some big ones.
Oh, they're big, yeah.
Look at this chunky boy.
Though, I've not managed to find a name for the breed per se, for another sort of that's my take of what I think is sort of very primitive looking cattle. Because I noticed last time I was in Sicily, but it was in May last year, I was in a bit of a traffic jam, as in there were a load of cattle just happily crossing the road. So I was stuck on a mountain road for some time, very all incredibly Sicilian.
As you do.
And it was, I think it was the first time that I'd seen any cattle sort of during my time down, since I'd learned more about zooarchaeology and more just about sort of livestock in general. So I think it's like, it was almost like it dawned on me because I paid attention to this cattle almost for the first time. And I noticed how like they're all like both the male and female were quite small, sort of reduced in size, but both sexes seem to have just humongous horns. And in a way, even though I'm not sure what breed that was, so they made me think of what I'd imagine cattle would have looked like sort of in the Iron Age, sort of when they were a little bit smaller and then they get sort of a bit bigger in the Roman period and then they get smaller again because that's what cattle do. So I found they're quite small, but more than anything, they're quite lean as well. Although that might have to do with the territory, because if you keep your cattle on a mountainside, they need to be agile enough so to move on the up on the mountain path.
It's only funny when I do it, Simona.
Excuse me. But I'll put the photo in the show notes.
Yes.
Bingo.
There you go.
Photo in the show notes.
Yep, there you go. All right. Well, as everyone else clears off their bingo cards for the next segment, I think we're going to take a break and we'll be back with some case studies.
You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to archpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's archpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show.
And we are back. And just before we talk about our case studies, there's actually one domesticated animal that we didn't bring up in the last segment, and that's dogs. And the reason why dogs are kind of like separate from them is because it's kind of complicated. That's kind of the gist that I've gotten.
It's a way to put it.
Yeah, so, like you're saying, the terminology is primitive breeds. Now, the thing about dogs is that you have primitive breeds and you have ancient breeds. And I know what you're saying. You're going, Alex, what's the difference? Isn't that kind of like the same thing? And honestly, that's what I think too. There's actually societies for primitive breeds and ancient breeds because, breeding is such a big thing with dogs, particularly with, show dogs and stuff like that. So apparently, primitive breeds refers to breeds that adapted and evolved without human influence. So the New Guinea singing dog, the dingo, the Carolina dog, those are all technically primitive breeds.
A New Guinea singing dog?
I have no idea what that is.
Does it sing?
I mean, I guess. Otherwise, isn't that false advertising?
I mean, like the person who named it that has probably not been around for a couple hundred years anyway, so...
But we can still probably sue them, just saying.
Guinea singing dog. Oh, they look beautiful.
Actually, look at them. Are they gorgeous?
Well, they look like...
They look like...
An Akita Inu and a dingo had a child, and he'll beat this dog.
Oh, they're weird look. They're not weird looking. They're just they're interesting looking. But yeah, I can see how that they would probably be a primitive breed.
Well, although it's very closely related to the dingo, so there you go.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, Google it if you don't know what it is. But then there's also ancient breeds, and that's actually a phrase I've come across before researching dog domestication for some side projects. And ancient breeds are descended from dog breeds that are more closely related to wolves than other domesticated species, like the Siberian Husky, the Basenji, stuff like that. And if you're thinking, hey, this is still kind of confusing, don't worry, it's very confusing because no one can still agree on dog domestication. So I guess that's kind of just what we have with dogs. It's a mess.
Just like dogs.
Just like dogs, a mess.
They're beautiful, beautiful messes.
They are very beautiful messes. Skeletally huge messes in a lot of breeds. Anyway, so as always, this segment is our case studies segment. So we're going to talk more about soy sheep because they're the best and very cute. So as we said in the previous segment, soy sheep are so named from soy St. Kilda. So, of course, it makes sense for us to talk about the St. Kilda Soy Sheep project. It's a joint project between the University of Edinburgh and the Imperial College of London. And its main focus is basically looking at the population dynamics and the ecology of soy sheep, specifically how the populations kind of fluctuate with time. And this is where that kind of cool applied zooarchaeology thing kind of comes in, because, this is something that you can actually do with this species. None of us can go and look at, say, the population dynamics of the auroch in real time right now. But because soy sheep and other primitive breeds still exist, you can do that kind of work. And it's super cool. And they're just so darn cute.
They are. Because I guess, St. Kilda is also, because of course there's soy sheep around elsewhere, but of course St. Kilda being, on a small island, it'll be sort of your perfect study, because sort of much like, I guess, a study being carried out on the Icelandic sheep in Iceland, the chance that, the breed has been sort of left there be for an extensive amount of time without too much outside influence. Mm-hmm. So you got a more controlled study there.
Yeah, I believe with the St. Kilda project, it's specifically looking at a population from Village Bay. This is a project that's been going on for a very long time, since the 80s, I believe. So because you have that long period, you can look at so many different factors. So some other themes include the effects on vegetation due to grazing, the changes in genetics and evolution of the sheep. I believe they're also surveying the parasite fauna, which is something I would not have thought of in a million years to look at, and the physical effects of aging among the sheep and the ways that kind of affects more of say deformities and bone modeling and things like that. It's extremely cool. Yeah, no, I'm super jealous. I want to do research like this.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting. I think we have selected here some of the most famous, renowned.
I love this. If you go on, we'll put a link to the project, as always, in the show notes. They actually have a wall of fame of some of their most famous sheep, and it's delighted me. So of course I'm going to bring it up in this segment. So here's 3 of their most famous sheep. So we have Old Green 23. So their naming conventions for the sheep were color coded and also numbers, but they also had nicknames. So Old Green 23, I believe, was also nicknamed Clark after Clark Kent, aka Superman. He lived between 1984 to 1992 and held the title of the largest ram in the population and had over 40 offspring during his time.
Oh my.
All right.
Old Green was busy.
Yeah, Superman, baby. Then we have New Green 007.
Oh, no.
Which I believe was just, was obviously nicknamed Bond, because, apparently lived between 1992 and 1997 and was born without any observable horns. And that's something that can happen with soy sheep. So, I've seen pictures of New Green 007, and it's just a very, very cute sheep with nothing going on up there. I mean, horn-wise, not brain-wise.
Was that maybe why the 007? Because he was in disguise. He had no horns.
I don't know. I think that was just that number convention. I have no idea. To be fair, I totally understand the idea of not really having a rhyme or reason to some labeling. Because if you looked at my bones for my project right now, it's like a free for all. It doesn't make sense. And then we also have Old Green.
No, 042.
Yeah, Old Green 042. She lived from 1984 to 1995 and had a new lamb every year between 1985 and 1994. And that included some years where she had twins. So she in total gave birth to 15 lambs, which is also wild. And I assume she must have gotten with Old Green 23, right?
I mean, she must have done.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the researchers involved in the project can tell us more about it.
I want to hear a tell-all book. Give us the hot gossip on these sheep. Where's that? I don't care about the like population dynamics report. Give me your tabloids about these sheep, you cowards.
Well, so like make a sort of reality TV show style.
Oh my gosh, I would love that. That would be amazing. I mean, technically, you could say that it was like a observation of population dynamics in real time, but it would just be a reality show, I guess.
That was the one reality show I would watch. Just a show like we're looking at sheep in St Kilda.
Oh, that sounds great. Also, if you're on Twitter, this isn't related to the St. Kilda sheep, but someone I'm mutuals with on Twitter, at Neolithic Sheep, they are a shepherd and they look at and look after soy sheep as well, and it's extremely cool. I think they're also at Neolithic Sheep on Instagram. So if you want to see some soy sheep all the time, follow that account.
Yeah, and I guess the second case study that we've got here is the Tauros program, which is part of the Rewilding Europe initiative, which I'm sure some of you may have heard about, and it's in collaboration with the Tauros Foundation. And what they're looking at doing is basically trying to backbreed cattle back into, well, at least something that resembles the aurochs.
Yeah, this was the wildest thing, because I originally found this during research and I was like, oh, cool. So this is like primitive cattle, and then didn't really read through it. And then when I did read through it, I was like, wait, this is kind of wild. This is some bonkers stuff that they're trying to do.
No, because in a way, no, they're choosing sort of particular sort of genetic or like morphological traits that are comparable to the aurochs, and sort of through backbreeding, they're going to try sort of like select specific types of cattle and sort of, and again, backbreed to like a species of cattle that resembles the aurochs. Because I'm sure like we're all under the understanding that because the aurochs is extinct, you can recreate something that looks like an aurochs, but an aurochs it ain't.
Yeah, no. So this is like a weird case study, but it's a case study I still want to talk about because it's technically not about primitive breeds that exist, but it's more about making a primitive breed from modern breeds. It's very confusing. It's a lot of genetic stuff, I guess.
But to be fair, like primitive breeds are sort of involved. I think they've done a genetic study, which was funded by the Giraffe Foundation, and they were trying to identify the heritage breeds today that share the most DNA with the aurochs. So I think inevitably the ones that came up in the research are sort of more heritage breeds as opposed to sort of very modern commercialized breeds. I think overall, sort of like two of the main sort of types that came up in the research were the Iberian and the Podolian breeds. And by Podolian, there's a specific group of heritage cattle breeds found mainly in Italy and the Balkans. Mm-hmm. So like these two types seem to have, among others, seem to share the most DNA with the aurochs. So far that kind of confirmed the Tauros Foundation was sort of the breeding program was on the right track, and they've identified a few more that have, well, desirable traits, for lack of a better term, but like traits that resemble those of the aurochs.
Yeah.
So in a way, like you will be choosing more heritage breeds that sort of have changed less from the aurochs compared to other cattle breeds.
Yeah, so I guess my question really is like, let's say, you know, their project's a success and they develop this kind of breed that's closer to aurochs. So like, do we consider that a primitive breed? Is it just like it is a modern attempt at a primitive breed, but like, how do we refer to that? You know?
It would be like a I can speak words. A modernly engineered primitive breed, or an ancient-looking breed.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think there's really anything. There probably is, and I just can't think of it. But the idea of this breed coming out of this project is an interesting way to kind of think about applied zooarchaeology, and this being a very applied zooarchaeology, I guess, in a way.
I think something similar has been done with, well, was attempted, I'm not sure what came of it, but with the mammoth. So they're trying to use archaeological mammoth DNA implanted sort of in living female elephants.
Mm.
It's just
it's really interesting, and I guess there's also kind of questions of so like the reasoning behind this entire initiative has been that the Rewilding Europe initiative has identified the auroch as a keystone species for the prehistoric European environment. So the idea being, if we bring these species back, we can backtrack our environmental kind of the environment back to a slightly more healthy place. But yeah, then it brings up questions of, is this ethical? And then is this actually going to even help our environment? I don't know the definitive answers to that. But
I mean, in terms of ethics, in all fairness, like over thousands of years, people have, like, the way we've bred every single domesticates has been based on traits that we at the time believed to be desirable.
Yeah.
So in a way, like, it's not much different, as in it's either all ethical or it all isn't.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm definitely not saying that there's a definitive, answer to that question. But I think it's an interesting thing to kind of consider. And like I said, I don't even know how helpful this would be, especially in our environment these days. Things have changed so much.
I mean, in a way, they would occupy a niche, but then again, it would have to be, which I'm sure that's what Rewilding Europe have got in mind. It will have to be part of a wider project, because if you create a cattle species that resemble to the aurochs and you just set it free, so the European forests, many of which are lacking the original predators that used to be here.
Yeah,
you're going to create yourself with, like, much like the deer population in the UK, you're going to get like an overpopulation of this massive herbivore that nothing can kill, and it's just going to spread. But I'm sure, like, that is probably I'm sure it's part of a sort of a much larger sort of project that would involve predators and more wolves and bears, and sort of try and reconstruct the ecosystem as it used to be.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously we're looking at this out of context because, just talking about this episode in general and the idea of primitive breeds. But yeah, you're right in that these kind of initiatives mean nothing if they're not part of a wider approach to the ecosystem.
Yeah, which I'm sure is the case for Rewilding Europe, because I think they're looking a lot at a European bison or lynxes.
Yeah, I think, are they also looking at? Oh no, I think that's more of a very specific thing with wolves here. But yeah, no,
that's the ones that in the southwest. I believe that's a study from a Swedish university.
Okay, yeah,
that's there. But I guess wolves would be part of. I think Rewilding Europe is involved with that, but in a way also think trying to come up with subsidies for farmers that lose livestock to sheep, sort of, and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's also interesting because I feel like, I've definitely, before this episode, I definitely had heard of reintroduction schemes with species such as wolves, which aren't, you don't necessarily think of as ancient species, but the auroch is such a weirdly unique kind of thing to try and bring back. It's just really interesting to me of like which species we decide to try and kind of like put back into the environment.
But then, to be fair, it's not been extinct that long in the grand
scheme of things. Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
It was the same with the wild boar in Britain, which is technically now reintroduced, but it had not been gone that long. Although, like, one thing that I personally wonder, but then again, I come as someone who's got very little knowledge in general in life and in the ins and outs of this particular subject. I wonder, sort of, to fill that ecological niche of sort of this wild roaming cattle, sort of, do you need a legit aurochs, or say some of our more like sort of the Sicilian sort of mountain cattle that I was talking about earlier? Mm-hmm. So the sort of range, sort of essentially wild in the mountains, won't they potentially do just as well? Or does it have to be something that looks like an aurochs?
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like we've ended up having way more questions than answers in this episode. But as we kind of take it to the close, if anyone's got some thoughts on this, feel free to send us your comments about this whole idea of kind of like the Taurus project and, not necessarily primitive species, but kind of creating a primitive species. What do you think about it? Should ethics be involved? Will it be useful in the environment? Please let us know, because we are on Twitter at archaeoanimals. And I think that's about it for this episode.
You may go have dinner.
Yay!
To be fair, you've been very good this episode.
Yeah, she's only mentioned it twice, and she's only complained about it once, so...
All right, this episode's over. I'm gonna eat my pulled pork angrily.
All right, catch us all next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Archaeoanimals. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. You can find us on Twitter at Archaeoanimals. Also, the views expressed on the podcast are those of ourselves, the hosts and guests, and do not necessarily represent those of our institution, employers, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.